The ballroom glittered like a palace carved out of light. Crystal chandeliers dripped with golden fire, violins sang in the corners, and every polished marble tile seemed to echo with wealth and pride. Guests in flowing gowns and tailored suits swirled through the grand hall, laughter sparkling louder than the champagne in their glasses. But amid all the extravagance, a man stood alone in the shadows near the entrance. His suit was pressed, his shoes shined, but there was no laughter on his lips. His eyes, dark, steady, unreadable, swept the room with a quiet weight. His name was Elijah, and though not a single person here knew it yet, this night would belong to him. At the far end of the room, the wealthy Harrington family held court. Billionaires, politicians, old money that had built empires on the backs of others. Lady Eleanor Harrington, regal in her diamond necklace, sipped her wine as if the world itself existed to entertain her. Her husband, Charles, laughed a booming laugh that silenced those who dared to interrupt. Their son, Victor, slick-haired, arrogant, leaned against a velvet pillar, tossing cruel smirks at the servants who hurried past. "Look at that one," Victor sneered, pointing at a cleaning maid carrying a silver tray. "She doesn't belong here. None of them do. This is a celebration, not a shelter." His friends laughed, a chorus of cruelty that echoed through the hall. The maid's hands trembled, but she said nothing. And in that silence, Elijah's eyes narrowed. The Harringtons believed tonight would be just another night of luxury, of dominance, of mocking those they thought beneath them. But secrets were about to rise from the ashes of their arrogance. Secrets that would drag every Harrington name into the fire. The orchestra swelled, and Eleanor clinked her glass for attention. "Friends," she began, her voice sharp as glass, "tonight we celebrate our family's legacy. Generations of Harringtons have built this city. We are its backbone, its pride, its standard of excellence." Applause rang out, but Elijah did not clap. He took a slow step forward, his shadow stretching under the golden light. The music faltered for just a second, as if the room itself sensed his arrival. A young woman, dressed in crimson silk, caught sight of him. Her eyes widened. She whispered to her companion, "Who is that man? He doesn't look like the others." Indeed, he didn't. There was no smugness, no arrogance in his face. Only purpose. Because Elijah carried something the Harringtons had long forgotten. Truth. And truth, once spoken, could shatter even the strongest empire. The speeches dragged on, arrogance dripping from every word. Victor mocked another servant, flicking his champagne onto the maid's apron. His friends roared with laughter. The poor woman bowed her head, gripping the tray until her knuckles whitened. But then, something happened. Elijah stepped into the light. Enough. The words sliced through the laughter like a blade. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Every eye turned. Silence spread across the ballroom like a shadow. Victor frowned. "Excuse me? Who do you think you are, speaking during my family's celebration?" Elijah's gaze did not waver. "I am the man who remembers what you've tried so hard to erase." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eleanor's eyes narrowed to slits. Charles straightened, his booming voice shaking the air. "You will explain yourself, or you will leave at once." But Elijah only smiled faintly. "Oh, I will explain. But you may wish you had silenced me before I began." The Harringtons laughed uneasily, trying to mask their sudden unease. But the guests leaned forward, curiosity sparking like wildfire. And in that instant, Elijah knew he had them. "Your legacy," he said slowly, his voice steady and clear, "is built not on excellence, but on exploitation. Not on pride, but on suffering. And I am here to tell their story, the story you buried." The chandeliers seemed to flicker. The room leaned in. Victor scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Another jealous beggar trying to smear our name. Pathetic. Throw him out." But Eleanor raised a hand, her curiosity momentarily stronger than her disdain. "No," she said. "Let him speak. I do enjoy a good story." Elijah's eyes gleamed. "Oh, you'll enjoy it, Lady Harrington. But you won't enjoy where it ends." The hush deepened. A storm had entered their palace of light, and no one could look away. Because in that ballroom, among the glitter and laughter, Elijah had planted the first seed of chaos. And once the truth began to bloom, not even the Harringtons' wealth could protect them. The first secret he revealed was small, almost too small. A deal made decades ago. A worker silenced. A debt unpaid. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, but the Harringtons waved it off with forced laughter. But then came another secret. Bigger. Darker. Harder to ignore. Documents forged. Contracts stolen. A fortune built on the ruins of ruined families. And then another. A betrayal that touched even the guests in this very hall. Faces paled. Murmurs rose. Every word Elijah spoke was a stone, and together they built a wall closing in on the Harringtons. Victor's smirk faltered. Eleanor's hand trembled on her glass. Charles's booming voice grew tight, defensive. And the crowd, once their audience of adoration, now looked at them with suspicion. With doubt. With anger. Elijah paused, letting the silence grow heavy. Then he leaned forward and said, "And yet, this is only the beginning." The chandeliers swayed slightly, though there was no wind. A tension hung in the air so thick, it felt like thunder waiting to strike. The Harringtons stared, trapped in the light of their own ballroom, while Elijah's shadow grew darker and darker across the floor. And as the room held its breath, Elijah spoke the words that shattered the night. "You mocked those who served you. You discarded those who built your fortune. But tonight, you will face them." The crowd gasped, spinning toward the entrance. And there, stepping into the golden light of the ballroom, came the first of many faces the Harringtons had long hoped never to see again. The storm had only begun. The doors slam open. Figures from the Harringtons' past, workers, allies, enemies long forgotten, begin to walk in one by one. Each face carries a story, and Elijah is about to expose them all. If you think this night can't get darker, you're wrong. Because the Harringtons' greatest secret hasn't even been touched yet. Stay with me, because what happens next will shake this ballroom to its core. And if you don't want to miss the truth when it finally breaks, make sure you're subscribed right now. The heavy wooden doors of the Harrington ballroom thundered open, crashing against the marble walls with a sound that silenced even the whispers. Heads turned. Champagne glasses froze mid-air. The chandeliers rattled as if shivering from the sudden gust of truth blowing in. And then footsteps. Slow, steady, purposeful. A woman in a faded uniform, her hands calloused from years of labor, stepped inside. Her grey hair was tied back, her eyes sharp, alive with a fire that no age could dim. Gasps rippled across the hall. Someone whispered her name. Ruth. Lady Eleanor's wine glass cracked in her grip. Ruth had been their maid 30 years ago. She had vanished overnight, dismissed without a word, whispered about in hushed tones. The Harringtons never spoke of her again. And yet, here she was, alive, unbroken, carrying with her a silence that was louder than the violins. Victor sneered, his voice dripping contempt. "This is absurd. That old woman is nothing. Just another servant clinging to ghosts." But Ruth's gaze sliced through him like a blade. "Ghosts," she said, her voice steady. "You should fear them, boy. Because I am one of them." The crowd stirred, uneasy. Eleanor raised her chin, feigning command. "This is nonsense. Charles, call security. End this circus at once." Charles opened his mouth, but Elijah's voice thundered first. "No, not yet. Let them in. Every one of them." As if on cue, more figures emerged through the doorway. A man with grease-stained hands, his overalls worn thin. A woman clutching a faded photograph, her face lined with grief. A group of men and women, ordinary but unyielding, filled the ballroom one by one. The Harringtons' ballroom, once a sanctuary of wealth, now looked more like a courtroom. And the jury had arrived. Elijah turned to the crowd of glittering guests. "These are the forgotten, the discarded, the lives the Harringtons erased in their pursuit of power. Tonight, their silence ends." Murmurs rippled through the room like waves. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their smiles faltering. The atmosphere was no longer a celebration. It was judgment. Victor, desperate to maintain control, scoffed. "These people? They're nobodies. They have no proof, no evidence, no voice." Ruth stepped forward, her hands trembling, but her voice strong. "Then listen. Because I was there the night it happened." The crowd leaned in. The chandeliers flickered, shadows stretching across the marble floor, like creeping truths. Ruth told her story. She spoke of nights scrubbing floors until her fingers bled, while the Harringtons laughed above her. She spoke of secrets whispered in the dark, documents hidden, bribes exchanged. And then she spoke of the night she was dismissed, because she had seen too much. "They thought if they threw me into the cold, I'd disappear," Ruth said, her voice cracking with rage. "But you cannot erase a witness. You cannot erase memory. And tonight, memory has come to collect." The crowd gasped. The Harringtons' smiles faltered into stone. Charles barked, his booming voice trembling. "Lies. All of it. Nothing but the bitter ramblings of an old servant." But then, another voice rose. The man in overalls stepped forward. His hands were rough, his face lined with decades of labor. "I built your factories," he said. "I watched men collapse at their machines because you cut corners for profit. And when I spoke out, you destroyed me. Took my pension. Took my home. My children starved while you dined in halls like this. The room grew colder, heavier. Guests who had laughed minutes ago now looked away, shame curling their faces. Elijah's eyes gleamed. The Harringtons were cornered, but this was only the beginning. Because every story was a stone. And soon, the avalanche would fall. Victor slammed his glass down, shattering it across the marble. Enough! This charade has gone far enough. You think you can stroll into our home and embarrass us with sob stories? Pathetic. Elijah stepped closer, his voice low, dangerous. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't your home anymore. It's their stage. And the world is watching. A murmur of agreement rose from the guests. Some pulled out their phones, recording, streaming, ensuring that every word, every accusation, left the confines of this gilded cage. Eleanor's face drained of color. Charles cursed under his breath. Victor looked around, realizing, for the first time, that power was slipping through his fingers. And then, Elijah dropped the bomb. Because it's not just their words, he said, pulling a folder from his coat. It's documents. Contracts. Records you tried to bury. He spread the papers across a silver tray, letting the guests glimpse signatures, seals, numbers that painted a damning picture. The silence was deafening. Eleanor's composure cracked. Where did you get those? She hissed. Elijah's smile was cold. Where you least expected. Truth hides in the cracks of arrogance. And your walls are full of cracks. The ballroom erupted. Guests shouted questions. Some demanded answers. Others glared at the Harringtons, as if seeing them for the first time. But Elijah raised his hand, silencing the chaos. His eyes locked on the family, his voice steady as stone. This is only the second chapter. And if you think this storm will pass, you haven't seen the lightning yet. Gasps spread. Guests leaned in, unable to look away. The Harringtons, cornered like prey, stared at Elijah with a mix of fury and fear. And as the clock chimed midnight, the chandeliers flickered again, plunging the hall into a shiver of darkness for just a moment. When the lights returned, the papers were gone. The crowd roared in confusion. Elijah's eyes darted across the room. Someone had taken them. A thief was among them. The truth had been stolen. And with that, the ballroom exploded into chaos. The proof Elijah brought, the very heart of his case, has been stolen right under everyone's nose. Who took it? Why? And how far will they go to keep the Harrington secrets buried? Someone in this room doesn't want the truth to come out. Someone is willing to risk everything to silence it. But who? If you're hooked, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me, because the next revelation will turn suspicion into shock. The ballroom was chaos. Voices clashed, chairs scraped, glasses shattered on marble. The stolen documents had turned a gathering into a battlefield of suspicion. Guests who had come to drink champagne and flaunt wealth were now pointing fingers, their polished masks slipping away under the weight of panic. Elijah stood at the center, his jaw clenched, his eyes scanning the room. He had brought the evidence to destroy the Harringtons, but now it had vanished into the hands of a thief. Somewhere among these silken gowns and tuxedos, truth had been swallowed whole. Lock the doors! Victor barked, his voice sharp with fury. No one leaves until we find those papers. Security guards rushed to the exits, sealing the crowd inside. The guests gasped, some protesting, others demanding explanations. The golden ballroom had become a gilded prison. Ruth's eyes burned as she turned toward Victor. You think caging us will silence us? You think locking doors can trap justice? But Eleanor's trembling hand clutched Victor's arm. He's right. Whoever took them can't escape now. The guests shifted uneasily. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who would be desperate enough to steal evidence? Was it a Harrington trying to bury the truth? Or one of the supposed victims, seeking their own leverage? Elijah raised his voice, commanding silence. Someone here just made themselves the most dangerous person in this room. And until they reveal themselves, every one of you is a suspect. Eyes darted, suspicion blooming like poison. A woman clutched her pearls tighter. A man in overalls took a step back. Even Ruth, unflinching moments ago, suddenly seemed smaller, shadowed by doubt. Elijah turned, his gaze piercing through the crowd. You all heard their stories. You all know their pain. But someone decided truth was too heavy for the world to carry. The question is, why? The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Then suddenly, a scream. A guest collapsed to the floor, clutching his chest. Gasps erupted. Some rushed to help, others recoiled. And when they pulled his hand away, there it was. A folded scrap of paper clenched in his dying grip. Elijah snatched it, unfolding the crumpled sheet. His heart pounded. It wasn't the stolen documents. But it was a note. scrawled in jagged ink. The Harringtons are not your only enemy. The words sent shivers through the hall. Murmurs rose, growing into a storm. If not just the Harringtons, then who? A larger force? Another hand pulling the strings from the shadows? Victor slammed his fist on the table. This is ridiculous. Some fool playing games with us. But Elijah's instincts screamed otherwise. Someone wanted him distracted. Someone powerful enough to twist even this night of reckoning into their own design. And then, the lights flickered again. This time, darkness swallowed the ballroom completely. Screams echoed. Glass shattered. A gunshot cracked through the black. When the lights returned, the room froze in collective horror. Charles Harrington was on the ground, blood blooming across his pristine white shirt. His eyes wide open, glassy, staring into nothing. Dead. Gasps shook the hall. Eleanor fell to her knees beside her husband's body, her screams tearing through the silence. Victor's face twisted in shock, rage, and perhaps fear. Elijah stood frozen, his heart thundering in his chest. This was no longer just about secrets. This was blood. Ruth's voice, trembling yet resolute, cut through the chaos. The past doesn't stay buried, Elijah. It claws its way out, and it always demands payment. Elijah's mind raced. Someone had silenced Charles before he could speak. Someone wanted this reckoning to collapse into chaos. And whoever it was, they had just declared war. Victor spun toward Elijah, his fingers stabbing the air. This is your fault. You brought this circus into our home. You stirred the ghosts. And now they've claimed their first victim. Elijah met his gaze, his voice cold as ice. No, Victor. This isn't over. This is just the beginning. The Harrington Empire isn't falling by accident. It's being dismantled piece by piece. The question is, who's really pulling the strings? The guests, once bystanders, now looked terrified. Some demanded to leave. Others begged to stay close, fearing the shadows that danced along the walls. The Golden Hall now reeked of blood and betrayal. Eleanor clutched her husband's lifeless hand, whispering through sobs. They'll destroy us, every one of us. Elijah knew she was right, but not in the way she meant. Because this wasn't just vengeance. This was war. And the battlefield had only just been drawn. The chandeliers above swayed ominously, their light fractured, as if the very walls of the Harrington mansion trembled with secrets desperate to be unleashed. But as Elijah turned, he noticed something chilling. Ruth was gone. The crowd erupted in panic. Where had she gone? Was she the thief? The witness? The executioner? Or was she the key to unlocking everything? Elijah's pulse quickened. The night had started with truth. It was ending with blood. And now, the most important piece had vanished into the shadows. Ruth, the one woman who carried the deepest secrets, has disappeared just as blood has been spilled. Was she taken? Did she flee? Or was she never who she claimed to be? The Harringtons thought they could bury the truth. But now, the truth is bleeding, missing, and more dangerous than ever. Who killed Charles? Where is Ruth? And what secret is so powerful that it's worth killing for? Hit that subscribe button now, because what happens next will shake every soul in this mansion. The ballroom no longer felt like a ballroom. It was a cage, a crime scene, a theater of fear. Charles Harrington's lifeless body lay on the marble floor, his blood a dark, ugly stain against the golden glow of chandeliers. Guests huddled together, whispering, their gowns and suits rumpled, their diamonds dull with terror. But the most unsettling thing of all was Ruth's absence. Elijah's chest tightened as he scanned the room again. She had been standing right there, her voice steady, her eyes sharp. And now gone. Slipped into the shadows, vanishing without a trace, just as the Harrington patriarch fell. Victor's voice cut through the room like a knife. Search the house. Every room, every hallway. Find that woman. His tone dripped venom. To him, Ruth wasn't just missing. She was guilty. But Elijah wasn't so sure. He remembered the way Ruth's eyes had glistened when she spoke of the pain she'd endured, the fire in her voice when she confronted the Harringtons. She wasn't a coward. If she had left, she had a reason. A guard ran toward Victor. Sir, the east wing doors, they're open. The crowd gasped. Open doors meant someone had breached the fortress. Perhaps Ruth had fled. Or perhaps someone had taken her. Elijah's instincts screamed. Follow the trail. He pushed past frightened guests, ignoring their murmurs. If Ruth is out there, she's walking into danger. I won't let her face it alone. As he moved, a voice stopped him cold. Elijah. Eleanor Harrington, her gown stained with her husband's blood, her hands trembling, stared at him with haunted eyes. You think you're hunting the truth. But the truth is hunting you. Her words struck him like thunder. What do you mean? But she shook her head, tears spilling. You don't understand. None of us are safe anymore. Not even me. Her cryptic warning only deepened the storm in Elijah's chest. He turned sharply, heading toward the east wing. The hallway stretched before him like a throat of shadows, lined with portraits of smug Harrington ancestors who seemed to smirk even in death. And then he heard it. A muffled cry. Help! It was Ruth's voice. He ran, his heart pounding. The cry grew louder, pulling him toward the library. The door was ajar, swinging on squeaky hinges. He pushed it open, and the sight before him made his blood run cold. Ruth sat tied to a chair, her mouth gagged, eyes wide with terror. A man stood behind her, his face masked, a pistol pressed to her temple. Elijah, the man said, his voice low, almost calm. Step inside and close the door. Elijah froze. The masked man's grip was steady, too steady. This wasn't panic. This was control. He raised his hand slowly. Let her go. This isn't about her. The man chuckled darkly. Oh, but it is. Ruth knows something. Something that could tear down more than just the Harringtons. She's been carrying it all along. Elijah's mind raced. Was this true? Had Ruth been holding back the one secret that tied everything together? Ruth's muffled voice screamed beneath the gag, shaking her head violently. Her eyes pleaded with Elijah, desperate, terrified. The man leaned close to her ear. Tell him, Ruth. Tell him what you've been hiding. The library was suffocatingly silent. Elijah's pulse hammered. Was Ruth an ally, or had she been a traitor all along? Before he could speak, a crash shattered the silence. The window exploded inward, glass raining down like shards of ice. Guards burst in, guns raised. The masked man cursed, yanking Ruth to her feet and dragging her toward the shattered window. Elijah! Ruth screamed as her gag fell loose. It's not me, it's... But before she could finish, the masked man yanked her through the window into the storm outside. Elijah lunged forward, but too late. Rain whipped through the broken frame, the night swallowing Ruth and her captor. The guards scrambled, some rushing outside, others scanning the library for clues. Elijah stood frozen, Ruth's unfinished words echoing in his mind. It's not me, it's... Who? Who had Ruth tried to name in those final seconds before she was dragged away? Victor stormed into the room, his face livid. Where is she? Elijah turned, his voice cold, steady. She's been taken. And unless we find her, the truth dies with her. Victor sneered. Perhaps that's exactly what should happen. Maybe the truth is too dangerous to be unleashed. But Elijah's jaw tightened. No, the truth isn't dangerous. The people hiding it are. The storm outside raged louder, lightning flashing against the stained glass windows. Somewhere out there, Ruth was fighting for her life, and the masked man was dragging her toward a secret powerful enough to shatter everything. And Elijah knew he had no choice. He would follow, no matter the cost. Because the story wasn't over. It was only getting darker. Ruth has been kidnapped by a masked man who claims she holds the ultimate secret, one that could destroy more than the Harringtons. Before she can reveal it, she's dragged into the storm. They thought silencing Ruth would bury the truth. But now, her unfinished words hang like a knife in the air. Who is she trying to expose? Who is the real mastermind pulling the strings? Subscribe now and stay with me, because in the next chapter, the storm outside won't just drench the mansion. It will wash away everything the Harringtons thought they controlled. The storm outside the Harrington estate roared like a beast unleashed, rattling the windows and howling through the trees. Lightning split the night sky, illuminating shadows that seemed alive with menace. Somewhere out there, Ruth was being dragged deeper into darkness, and with her, the final piece of the truth. Elijah's heart hammered as he sprinted through the shattered library doors into the rain-soaked night. His shoes slapped against the stone courtyard, his breath tearing raggedly through his lungs. The masked man was ahead, dragging Ruth across the lawn toward the iron gates. Her cries were swallowed by the storm, her silhouette flashing in and out of sight as lightning flared. Ruth! Elijah shouted, his voice breaking the night. The masked man turned briefly, his face hidden, his grip unrelenting. He shoved Ruth forward, forcing her toward a waiting black SUV, idling by the gate. Its headlights cut through the rain, casting harsh beams on the chaos. Elijah surged forward, but hands seized him from behind. Guards! Stand down, sir, one barked. This is out of your hands. Elijah wrenched free, fury burning in his veins. Out of my hands. She's the only one who can expose the rot inside this family. If she disappears tonight, the truth dies forever. The guards hesitated, torn between duty to Victor and the fire in Elijah's words. For the first time, Doubt flickered across their stern faces. But hesitation was a luxury Elijah couldn't afford. He sprinted forward, mud splashing, muscles screaming. The masked man shoved Ruth into the back seat of the SUV and turned, pistol raised. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked through the sheets of rain. And then Elijah saw it. The faint scar running from the man's temple to his jaw. Recognition struck him like thunder. It wasn't a stranger. It was Daniel Harrington, the Harrington's golden son. The heir who'd supposedly left for Europe years ago, running from scandal. The prodigal who had vanished from family photographs, erased from polite conversation. And now here he was masked, armed, dragging Ruth into the night. Daniel, Elijah breathed, his voice laced with disbelief. It was you all along. Daniel's smirk was cold, cruel. The loyal janitor finally sees the truth. A pity you'll never live to tell it. Before Elijah could react, the SUV door slammed, the engine roared, and the vehicle tore down the gravel drive, vanishing into the storm. Elijah collapsed to his knees, soaked, breathless, his mind spinning. Ruth's unfinished words echoed louder than the thunder. It's not me, it was Daniel. Daniel Harrington, the shadow pulling strings behind the scenes. But why? Why would the son of unimaginable wealth orchestrate such chaos? Lightning struck again, and with it a memory. Ruth's story, her quiet whispers of secrets buried, of sins committed behind the Harrington name. And suddenly it clicked. This wasn't just about money. This was about legacy. Power. Revenge. Elijah staggered to his feet, his fists clenched. He would not let Ruth vanish. Not tonight. Hours later, the Harrington mansion was a hollow husk of whispers and fear. Guests had fled, rumors already swirling through the city like wildfire. Charles Harrington was dead. His son Victor looked broken, his empire trembling. And Daniel, the forgotten heir, had returned like a ghost to claim his vengeance. Elijah stood at the window, staring into the storm's fading fury. He knew what had to be done. He couldn't stop now. Not when Ruth's life hung in the balance, not when the truth clawed so close to the surface. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered cautiously. Hello. A faint, trembling voice replied. Elijah. It was Ruth. Relief slammed into him. Ruth. Where are you? Are you safe? Her voice broke. No. He's taken me to the old docks. He says it ends tonight. Elijah, you have to. The line cut abruptly, replaced by static. Elijah's blood iced over. The old docks. Abandoned, isolated. A place where screams would vanish into the waves. This was it. The final showdown. The drive was a blur of wet streets and flashing headlights. By the time Elijah reached the docks, the rain had eased, leaving the night eerily still. The water lapped softly against rotting wood, and the air reeked of salt and rust. And there, under the flickering glow of a single floodlight, stood Daniel Harrington. Ruth was tied to a post beside him, her hair clinging wetly to her face, her eyes defiant despite the fear. Daniel stepped forward, his mask gone now, his handsome features twisted with bitterness. Do you know what it's like, he spat, to be erased? To be born into power, only to be cast aside because your choices didn't fit their perfect image. Elijah's voice was low, steady. You had everything. Wealth. Status. Ruth had nothing. And yet she chose courage. That's why you fear her. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Fear her? No. I respect her. She sees what most refuse to. But her truth threatens to burn it all down. And I, his voice cracked with venom, I will not be destroyed by a woman who was supposed to be invisible. He raised his pistol, aiming it at Ruth. Elijah's body tensed, every nerve screaming. Daniel, stop. You've already taken a father. Don't take her too. You still have a choice. For a moment, Daniel's jaw worked, torn between rage and hesitation. Ruth's voice cut through the silence, trembling but fierce. You can kill me, Daniel. But you can't kill the truth. It will outlive you. It always does. The words pierced him. His hand shook, the pistol wavering. And in that fraction of hesitation, Elijah lunged. The struggle was brutal, bodies colliding against rusted metal, fists flying. The pistol clattered to the ground, sliding across the wet dock. Daniel fought like a man possessed, his strength fueled by years of resentment. But Elijah fought with something fiercer, with purpose, with fire, with the desperate need to protect. At last, Elijah slammed Daniel against the post, pinning him. Breathless, he hissed. It ends here. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. Red and blue lights streaked the night sky. Daniel's face twisted in defeat as officers swarmed the dock, dragging him into custody. Ruth sagged into Elijah's arms, trembling but alive. You saved me, she whispered, tears mixing with rain. Elijah shook his head softly. No, Ruth. You saved yourself. You always have. As the police carted Daniel away, the storm finally broke, the clouds parting to reveal a pale dawn. The Harrington Empire lay in ruins, its darkest secret exposed. And Ruth, the woman they had mocked, dismissed, and underestimated, stood at the center, not as a victim, but as the catalyst of truth. Elijah turned to her, his voice firm. The world will know your story, not as a footnote, but as a fire that couldn't be silenced. Ruth's eyes shone with quiet strength. Then let's make sure they hear it. Together, they walked away from the docks, leaving behind the shadows of lies and stepping into the light of a new day. But even as the first rays of dawn broke, Elijah knew this was just the beginning. Because the truth, once unleashed, had a way of setting the world ablaze. They mocked her, tried to erase her, and even dragged her into the storm. But Ruth's courage turned the tide, and her truth shattered an empire. Now the question is, how many more secrets still hide behind closed doors like the Harringtons? If you believe stories like Ruth's must be told, don't just watch. Subscribe, like, and share this journey, so together we can bring every hidden truth into the light.